First, Genghis Khan, the founder of the empire, deliberately and really very ingeniously overcame the clan and tribal animosities that had divided the people of the Mongolian steppe for hundreds of years, uniting them under a single identity, the people of the Felt Walls. In this way, he put together an inter-ethnic army large enough to conquer northern China. From there, Genghis Khan shrewdly recruited men from conquered populations with the skills and technology that the Mongols themselves lacked. Most critically, Genghis Khan drew into his service large numbers of Chinese engineers who knew how to construct these powerful siege engines with portable towers, retractable ladders, and massive catapults that hurled stones and flaming liquids. The imagery is like Lord of the Rings, right? It was only by incorporating these foreign engineers who actually, it's very interesting, they traveled with the Mongol army and often built these instruments of attack right on the spot. They would just fell trees and erect these siege engines. It was only by incorporating these foreign engineers that the Mongols were able to overcome the great walled cities of Central Asia, Persia, and Eastern Europe. For all their ruthlessness in battle, the Mongols were far more religiously tolerant than any other contemporaneous power. While Christian Europe was burning heretics at the stake, Genghis Khan, who himself worshipped nature, he was an animist, he declared religious freedom for all subject peoples. His sons and grandsons married wives of all religious and ethnic backgrounds, and their armies included Buddhists, Muslims, and Christians of every sect. In the end, different parts of the Mongol Empire collapsed at different times, but everywhere decline was accompanied by a stark turn to ethnic and religious intolerance. By 1300, the Mongol Khans of Russia and Persia had converted to Islam, and they became increasingly fanatic in their persecution of non-Muslims. In China, the problem was actually ethnic intolerance. Unlike Kublai Khan, who was the first Mongol emperor of China, who loved Chinese culture and embraced it, really protected it, in some ways better than the Chinese, unlike him, the later Mongol rulers grew more and more paranoid and anti-Chinese, with one Mongol minister, just before the collapse of the Mongol Empire in China, with one Mongol minister proposing that all individuals in China surnamed Chang, Wang, Liu, Li, and Chao be executed. This plan would have eliminated 90% of China's population. But before it could be carried out, the Mongols were sent fleeing back to the steppe by the new Ming Chinese rulers. So this brings us to the end of the pre-modern hyperpowers. The next society to arguably attain global dominance was, amazingly, the tiny Dutch Republic of the 17th century. The secret to Holland's stunning success was, once again, tolerance. But now, tolerance of a radically new kind. After the fall of Rome in 476 came the rise of the great religious empires, those of Christianity and Islam. Now, unlike the ancient polytheistic religions, which assumed that different peoples would worship different gods, I mean, every city had its own god, both Christianity and Islam insisted that there was one and only one true faith. In this sense, Christianity and Islam were inherently intolerant in a way that the ancient religions were not. Whether or not sanctioned by scripture, the result was a millennium of religious strife and bloodshed. In the West, the era of religious wars slowly gave way to the Enlightenment. Now, for the Enlightenment thinkers, tolerance was not merely instrumental. It was a human right. Thus was born the modern ideal of tolerance that we're all familiar with, that's enshrined in our Constitution, that we often fail to live up to, that we teach in law schools. Persecution was not only bad strategy, it violated the rights of man. The Dutch Republic was the first European state to embrace this new tolerance. In 1579, the United Provinces of the Netherlands declared in its founding charter that each person shall remain free in his religion, and no one shall be investigated or persecuted because of his religion. Almost overnight, the Dutch Republic became a magnet for religious refugees from all over Europe. French Huguenots, German Lutherans, Mennonites, Quakers, Pilgrims. Of the tens of thousands of immigrants that poured in, well, other major cities were actually depopulating. Of the tens of thousands of immigrants that poured in, two groups in particular were pivotal to Holland's rise. First were the Jewish bankers, merchants, and diamond traders fleeing the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions. These men, among the richest in the world, financiers of Europe's royalty, bankrollers of armies, turned Amsterdam into the world's commercial and financial center. Second were the Protestant industrialists and artisans from Antwerp, Ghent, and Bruges, who brought with them not only wealth, but critical industrial secrets, the world's most advanced textile technology, and, as Max Weber would later put it, the spirit of capitalism itself. With the decisive contributions of these two groups, the Dutch soon became the financial, technological, and commercial leaders of Europe, and indeed the world. But even so, and I'm sure some of you are thinking this, can it really be said that the Dutch Republic was a hyperpower? I haven't heard much about them. After all, its army was not the largest standing army in Europe, although it was the second largest and probably the most efficient and well-equipped. Well, I think to focus on the size of its standing army is to misunderstand how the Dutch Republic triumphed over its rivals. The Dutch never sought to conquer the European continent. Its empire, of course, was a maritime empire, devoted far more to commercial expansion than territorial expansion. By the 17th century, naval might had become the royal road to world dominance, and the Dutch took control of the seas. The extent of Dutch maritime domination is astonishing, and I lay this out in more detail in the book, but just a few facts. Of the 20,000 ships involved in the world's carrying trade in the mid-17th century, out of those 20,000, approximately 16,000 were Dutch. In 1639, Dutch warships humiliated the once indomitable Spanish Navy, destroying 60 of Spain's 77 warships at a cost of just one Dutch ship. At its peak, the Dutch Navy was roughly equal to the French and English naval forces combined, which is a staggering fact given that France's population was 10 to 20 times larger. Controlling the oceans, the Dutch completely cornered Europe's so-called rich trades, that is the immensely lucrative global traffic in luxury commodities. Dutch ships traveled to distant quarters of the world, carrying back East Indies pepper and spices, sugar from Brazil and San Tome, Turkish mohair, Castilian wool, Indian cotton, and raw diamonds. The Dutch either traded these riches throughout Europe or brought them back to Holland, where the raw materials were processed and then re-exported at enormous profit in the form of luxury tapestries, patterned silks, fine linens, exquisitely cut gemstones. Between 1625 and 1675, the Dutch Republic was far and away the richest nation on earth, with a global trading empire and an unheard of degree of upward mobility. Again, how did the Dutch achieve this? Largely through immigrant investment, immigrant innovations in raising capital, immigrant manufacturing skills, technology, and trading networks. Note then that the rise of the Dutch Republic marked a dramatic transformation in the nature of both world power and tolerance. With the Dutch, commerce replaced conquest as the driving engine of wealth creation, and immigration replaced invasion and annexation as the best way to incorporate the world's best and brightest.